Hello, everyone. My name is Carl Wright, and welcome to the 2023 Impact Report webinar. We still have a number of people coming in, so we're just going to give it about one more minute, and then we'll kick off the webinar. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we got quite a few people on the webinar now, so let's go ahead and kick this off. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Carl Wright. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at AttackIQ. And with me, I am joined today by the Director of the Center for Threat Informed Defense, John Baker. Welcome, John.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm super excited today to be talking about the 2023 Impact Report. It just seemed like a few months ago that we were together talking about the 2022 Impact Report. And oh my gosh, what a bunch of amazing projects the center got done this last year.
Yeah, last year, 2023 was a big year for us. I think that over the course of the year, we saw projects kind of growing in their scope and along with that, kind of the impact that they've had. So that's been really nice to see. And you know, out on like the conference circuit and talking to people, hearing from people about how they're using center R&D within their security programs to make a difference. That's incredibly motivating for me and the whole team. So yeah, the impact report for us is a good opportunity to kind of reflect a little bit on the work that we did and, you know, think about where we're going this year as we move forward.
Well, before we jump into the impact report, why don't we talk a little bit about CTID and for some of the members that might, or folks that may be on the webinar today that are not quite yet familiar with the great work that the center does.
Yeah, so the Center for Threat Informed Defense is a nonprofit R&D organization. Our whole mission is to advance threat informed defense for the entire global community. So what I've tried to do in building the center is to bring sophisticated security teams together to identify the most pressing, sort of most impactful problems to solve, and then try to solve them through our research program. So I'm very fortunate in this environment. It's an environment for continual learning with a focus on impact. I get to work with Carl, his team, and teams from across our membership to systematically identify problems and try to solve them in a way that impacts the entire community. You know, as the slide says, ultimately we're trying to change the game here. We're trying to make it harder for adversaries to achieve their goals and make cyber defense more efficient and effective.
You know, John, I was looking at, you know, the impact report from last year and just kind of comparing and contrasting. You know, we'll talk more about this as we go through the slides, but some of the differences between last year and this year. And, you know, you added quite a few new members to this slide. And so it was a great year, not just for the projects that the center focused on and delivered for public good to the community, but also a lot of new names on this list, which is outstanding.
Yeah, as we get into things, I think, you know, last year, yeah, it was our biggest year for growth. We added 9 new members to the center. And, you know, we're continuing to look for the right sorts of organizations to join us. I'm trying to build a global cross-sector membership base. Having that global and cross-sector membership base is really important. It's part of the design to help us understand and identify the most pressing problems. That diversity of perspective helps us create solutions that will hopefully be easily used and broadly impactful, right? And so last year saw us bring in our first member out of the insurance sector. We brought in some new members in the healthcare sector. We brought in some new members in the semiconductor manufacturing space. It's been really great to start to see some of that diversity come into the R&D discussion. And, you know, when we got started with the center, Carl, and I know you remember these early conversations, there was this hope or expectation that, you know, we could build this diverse membership base, but that we would find that there were common problems and common challenges that were faced by all of those members or many of those members, right? And then we could get together and solve them. And what's been encouraging for me is as we've grown, what we see is more engagement in the research program, an increase in the number of participants for any particular research project. And ultimately, hearing that kind of feedback from our members about how they've also learned in the course of the research and benefited from the actual research experience, not just the R&D output. So it's been really nice to see that mature.
Well, and obviously, the projects, there's more and more that are getting done, and there's more coming in queue, and we'll definitely talk about that later. But with all these additional organizations coming in, it has also increased the amount of resources that we have to allocate to these projects, and making the projects, I think, deeper in content, deeper in sophistication, and some of the things that we're working on. So it's been great.
Yeah, that it's important to note that when our members join, they're signing up to work together in a pretty unique environment, and they're committing to not only work together but to actually fund the research. And so I'm always very appreciative of both the technical time and expertise that our members bring to the research program, but also the funding and the resources that allow us to do the work that we do.
Well, and that's a perfect lead into this slide. And we use the word threat-informed defense quite a bit, and I think still industry's grappling with how to define this. What is threat-informed defense, right? But I think certainly from the center's perspective, this is a great place to start in talking about the research that we do.
Yeah, so we defined threat-informed defense to be the systematic application of a technical understanding of adversary behaviors to improve your defenses. So, distilling that down a bit, it's all about using threat intelligence to understand what adversaries do and align your defenses to the threats that are most relevant to your organization. So in the Center for Threat-Informed Defense, our mission is to advance threat-informed defense, both the state of the art and the state of the practice. And the way we do that is by kind of carving out problem areas that all kind of come together to support threat-informed defense. So, as I said a minute ago, it starts with threat intelligence. And then there's sort of this cycle that uses threat intelligence to understand behaviors, to then test and emulate or evaluate those behaviors in your environment, to then drive improvements to your defensive posture, and then kind of rinse and repeat as we go. So we're continually learning, and we're continually testing and evaluating our capabilities, and we're continually improving our capabilities. And so if our mission is to advance threat-informed defense, what we're then trying to do is make it easier for organizations to operationalize the great threat intel products that are out there, to make it easier for us to, as a whole community, understand what adversaries are doing at the level of specific behaviors that are seen in the wild. And then from there, we want to make it much easier and more cost-effective for security teams to look at their defenses from the perspective of an adversary on a continual basis. And so we do research projects that kind of lay foundational resources across these problem areas that enable teams, that enable innovation across industry. And then, of course, finally, it all comes together in trying to figure out how do we advance our defensive capabilities as well in a way that supports the entire community. And because of our mission and our charter as a nonprofit, the way we try to advance threat-informed defense for the whole community is through research aligned with these problem areas that we then make open and freely available to the entire community.
No, that is absolutely amazing. And so, when we start talking about, that collaboration, which we've talked about a little bit already, there's a lot of resources that are being put together to help people better operationalize both, obviously, the MITRE ATT&CK framework, as well as this kind of umbrella threat-informed defense.
Yeah, the way I describe it, and we kind of use that funnel image there, because we're always looking, we're always talking to people, we're bringing in inputs and perspectives from across MITRE's internal research program, ideas, problems that we see across the community, same thing from across our membership base, and we're working to then systematically kind of study those, understand them, refine them, and decide, which of those problems or challenges are things that we ought to focus on. And so we have this systematic process. I refer to it as our innovation pipeline, where we kind of work a concept through to a running project. We don't do everything. We're working to create that set of open, freely available foundational resources that'll benefit everyone, right? But then once we've identified a problem that we want to solve, we work together with our members to tackle that problem. And throughout the course of the research, we're trying to evolve that solution into something that you and the whole community can use to benefit your security program.
No, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go forward there. I always like to talk about the Genesis story, but we've come a long way, since 2019, right? Or even prior to that when we think about MITRE ATT&CK. And, if you think about kind of the very beginning of this with the enterprise framework, and it was just the enterprise framework, right? And some of the very first projects that we did in 2019 and 2020 to extend the enterprise framework to cover so much more of the surface area that people were dealing with, right? And that continues to be the trend of these projects.
Yeah, when we got started, our founding members were a set of organizations that were kind of already heavily using MITRE ATT&CK and saw the value in MITRE ATT&CK and wanted to work together to advance ATT&CK for their own benefit and for the community's benefit. And then there was this kind of common theme that we saw of those founders, before they were founders, wanting to work with us and see if there were others that they could work with to advance resources around ATT&CK, around what we eventually called threat-informed defense. It was at that point that we had the aha moment that we needed to figure out a way to, instead of having a whole bunch of sort of one-off individual bespoke conversations, to really systematically bring the community together to give us a way to very efficiently go from problem to project to published impactful resource, right? And that really is the thing that motivated me and my co-founder in creating the Center for Threat-Informed Defense. And it's been amazing to have the support of Carl, the AttackIQ team, and our other founders to take that early concept. There was a bit of a leap of faith, of course, as we were getting up and running, and help us turn that concept into an organization that's now a little over 4 years old with a nice track record of impactful R&D and a lot of work going on right now.
Well, that's a perfect lead into track record. So here's some of the stats if you want to take us quickly through them, John.
Yeah, we have 36 members, and in fact, we're about to welcome our 37th member in the next week or so here. So steadily growing membership base. We are actively developing 5 projects, and the thing that I think is worth mentioning about the projects in development kind of metric is that that's always changing. There's always new projects coming in and starting. We launched 2 projects in January. We're going to publish 5 projects over the course of March and into early April. So we have a very busy R&D program and pipeline of publications. I expect between February and March, we'll start up at least 2 more projects. So projects are always coming and going into the research program through that innovation pipeline that I mentioned.
Well, we're definitely going to talk a little bit later how people can get involved with both with the center. But I think let's dive into some of the projects from this last year. And the reality is there's quite a few projects that the center completed this last year. And today we've selected 4 that we're going to talk about in some level of detail. And again, these are resources that are on the CTID website. We'll give you a link to that later here in the presentation. But these are great opportunities for beginners, intermediate, and advanced users of the MITRE ATT&CK framework to really take their game and their cyber defensive operations to the next level. And so, John, I'm pretty excited about this first project, Solving the Pyramid of Pain. I know people have heard this before, but we've actually, the center put some real work behind that. So let's talk about this one first, please.
Yeah, to be honest, I try not to pick favorites among the research program and the projects that we develop, but this one is one that I'm particularly proud of, the work that we did with our members and our team. And the reason for that is that at the end of the day, it gives every security team that has people that are sitting down thinking about how do I detect adversaries in my environment, it gives them essentially a playbook or a cheat sheet to upskill their team. So if you have a detection engineering team, you should check out Summoning the Pyramid. It's ultimately a systematic approach to helping you create more robust analytics. When I say robust, I mean harder for an adversary to evade. So what we did was we took a look at the Pyramid of Pain that David Bianco created, and we tried to create a framework and an approach to looking at a detection for some specific adversary behavior and guiding a detection engineer to make that detection more robust. So moving it up the Pyramid of Pain, closer towards detecting the behavior and away from detecting individual IOCs. You mentioned origin stories, Carl, and I like this one in particular because it was really, we got started down this path because of the Solarigate compromise a few years back. We looked around at that time and found that there were open source repositories of detections that had detections that could have caught or should have, at least by the way they were labeled, caught the specific behaviors seen in that attack. And when we dug deep, we found that several of those detections that should have helped really were easily evaded by the adversary because the file name had changed. It's something as ephemeral as a file name, right? And so we kind of realized we ought to figure out a way to help all detection engineers avoid that pitfall and create more robust detections. The other thing I like about this is, as with any good research project, we learned a ton through the course of the project, and we've actually identified a whole sort of follow-on round of research. And so we have plans this year to continue the research, to continue to mature the Summoning the Pyramid project and resources along with it. When you take a look at the project sponsors on this project, I'm particularly impressed by the amount of collaboration and engagement that we had on this project. We ended up with, and if you take a look at the impact report, you'll see some quotes about it from some of our members. But the work that we did here was directly pulled into security capabilities that are fielded to millions and millions and millions of endpoints around the world. That the work we did directly influenced one of the largest operating systems in the world that we all depend on in our enterprises. And so it's that kind of collaboration coming together with a really robust solution that can then lead to really global impact. And to me, the Summoning the Pyramid project is a great example of really smart people getting together to try to create a resource that makes things better for everyone.
That's a great point. And, you know, even at AttackIQ, as a founding research partner, we've worked on so many projects here. And obviously those projects get published for the public good and people can take advantage of those. And, you know, some projects are super easy for people to take advantage of. We'll talk about one of those later today. Some are a little bit more complex, but the reality is at AttackIQ, many projects that we worked on have made it into our product to make it easier for people to consume that capability or whatever it might be. So that's been, I think, it wasn't surprising because I think from the beginning it was designed for people to use the research, but the fact that product vendors are incorporating that into their products, I think is a statement to the impact of the research.
Yeah, honestly, it's critical to allow us to have really global scale, right? If that's the mission, to have a global impact, we need to create solutions that are easily incorporated into capabilities that everybody uses.
Okay, so let's go on to our second one, which is CTI blueprints. And you know, this is a particularly interesting project to me, for a lot of different reasons. And John, we're definitely going to get to why you like this project as well, even though it's not your favorite, like something. But I've heard over and over and over again with all the different organizations we work with in the world that, you know, there is not a common lexicon at all for how different organizations kind of, you know, publish CTI reports and things of this nature. So we were particularly, you know, interested in this project just because it seemed there was a lot of wasted effort across different organizations an analyst that goes from one organization to the next, has a completely different format that they're dealing with. And so I thought this template, this objective of creating CTI blueprints was a very interesting objective for the world.
Yeah, the reason I like this project, you'll see I'm very fond of the projects where, you know, we go in and we learn and we evolve our whole way of thinking about the project as we go through the course of the research. You know, for me, for a project to be a favorite of mine, it also has to be impactful. So when I look at this project, you know, we started out driven by organizations and threat intel teams asking us questions like, you know, what's the best way to incorporate attack references into our threat intel reporting? How do I tailor my threat intel reporting to, you know, fit different audiences? And those are some of the motivating questions that got us started with CTI blueprints. But those are questions coming from some pretty sophisticated threat intel teams, some pretty well-resourced teams. And as we went along, we learned that you know, CTI blueprints is actually a great resource to help any threat intel team kind of upskill their threat intel reporting capability. And you know, that's why I particularly like this, is because it will allow, you know, sort of newer emerging threat intel teams to very quickly start creating very professional reports benefiting from the expertise of our members in the way that we captured the templates that we use in CTI blueprints. And so ultimately, CTI blueprints gives you a set of templates and guidance and best practices to create threat intel reporting that's targeted towards a set of specific use cases. So using CTI blueprints allows an intel team to create reports that are easily actionable for their targeted users. I've seen this one now used by threat intel teams directly to mature their capabilities. I've seen this project used by consulting organizations that help other threat intel teams, you know, like stand up and mature their reporting capabilities. And that then allows the project to really scale, right? To have someone come in and kind of train a team on using CTI blueprints to mature their threat intel analysis and reporting capability. And so it's been really nice to see that sort of scale. I've seen it used by professors in college courses as well to teach people how to do threat intel reporting. I love to see that kind of impact from our research program.
Absolutely, and this is a great resource for, like you mentioned, different teams with different capability maturity models can take advantage of this, whether you're just starting out or whether you're a fairly sophisticated team dealing with sophisticated threats. And this project, along with the other ones that we're talking about today, are available on the CTID website. You know, we're giving you a snippet here, but the entire project is on the website, and you have access to the GitHub with all the various aspects of the project and tools that you can use on a daily basis. So we'll make sure at the end of this you can get the URL. This one, we actually at AttackIQ, we also produced an AttackIQ Academy course. And so these courses are designed with mostly hands-on labs and different things to help you understand how to leverage it in your organization. And they're fairly snackable in the sense they're usually 30 to 70 minutes, depending on the complexity of the project and the lesson plans. So encourage you to check that out. AttackIQ Workbench 2, this is a great example of basically taking a Gen 1 project that we did a while ago and really up-leveling it after we got lots of great feedback from organizations that took advantage of the first iteration of the project. And this one actually produced, I think, an amazing result. And so, John, you know, why don't you give us a quick overview of this project, and then let's talk about how people are using it today.
Yeah. So yeah, Carl, as you said, this is Workbench 2. So this is a second iteration at the Attack Workbench. The Attack Workbench was designed to kind of get teams past managing all of their annotations and, you know, additional context that they might have around an attack technique in Excel spreadsheets. So we used to see teams all over the place like one of the first things they did when they started using Attack was open up an Excel spreadsheet and start, annotating techniques with additional information. With Workbench, we're trying to give you a single central web application that then is easy to stay in sync with the Attack knowledge base and allows you to annotate and extend the knowledge base. So if you think about that spreadsheet, the next time an Attack release comes out, well, you got to rebuild your spreadsheet. You got to go through row by row, try to figure out, well, what changed in this Attack release. Workbench kind of takes that whole problem off the table. It allows you to automatically pull in updates. It shows you what's changed, so you can easily decide how best to evolve or incorporate your own local edits. But Workbench does more. It was also designed to allow you to extend Attack. Let's say you're one of those sophisticated threat intel teams out there that maybe has insight on some adversary TTPs that aren't public yet. You can go and extend Attack and add your own TTPs to your local copy of Attack. At some point, if you want to share those TTPs back with the community, the Workbench will allow you to do that, but you're not required to do anything like that at all. I've seen people use Workbench to create essentially extended versions of the Attack knowledge base that maybe include a lot of red team TTPs. Those sorts of things that maybe aren't yet used by adversaries in the wild, but your red team uses, and you want to keep track of them in one consistent manner, right? Ultimately, Workbench 2, it gives you the ability to do all of that, extend and tailor and customize the Attack knowledge base with your organization, but gives you the ability to do that and share it with a team easily. So teams can come in and access the same resource, keep track of who changed what, all of those sorts of things. Workbench is also the foundation that we use at MITRE to evolve the Attack corpus. So in this case, we kind of leverage the same resource that's out and available for the whole community to evolve the corpus ourselves. And so every time we do a release, there's a new Workbench update that goes out along with that as well.
John, is there a relationship between this particular project and Attack Sync?
So, thinking of favorite projects that didn't make the agenda for today, Carl, Attack Sync was actually a direct result of some of the work that we've been doing with Workbench. For those of you that haven't heard of Attack Sync, if you just Google Attack Sync, it'll be your first hit. It's
that's on SINK, right?
Yeah, no, not Attack Sync, Sync SYNC. But yeah, if you take a look at Attack Sync, it's a resource that'll help you easily migrate your content from one version of Attack to the other. We know security teams everywhere map resources to Attack. We do a lot of it within our research program at the center. We know it's painful when Attack evolves. We want to make it easier, so we created Attack Sync. We did an experiment kind of testing how much time it would save updating the work that we did to map NIST 853 to Attack. And going from one version to the next, it saved us 70% of the time it took to do that analysis. So huge time saver there. And that to me is a foundational resource that the whole community should have. That shouldn't be kept in a silo anywhere or hidden in somewhere. That should be out for everyone.
I also think it's a great example of how projects come together to work together to create something better for the whole, right? So now we have two different projects, two different products, but they work together in order to help organizations better streamline their workflows, right?
Absolutely.
All right, let's keep going. This was one of the more interesting projects. I'm not going to say it's our favorite, but it's definitely pretty darn cool. Obviously, the world worries about Windows most of the time, but some of the newer adversaries on the block here have started taking a look at Mac and Linux. And this project, really was one of the first projects I think we did at the center that was focused on campaigns against Mac and Linux. You want to take us a quick overview of this, John?
Yeah. When we got started, Carl, one of our very first research projects was the Fin6 adversary emulation plan. That created, along with the plan, what we refer to as the adversary emulation library. So the library is a collection of open, freely available emulation plans that all have kind of like the same basic look and feel. We're trying to make it much easier for teams to understand a particular threat and go and emulate that in their environment. They're all Intel driven. They have a fair amount of work is done in each of those to collect and analyze a variety of Intel sources to then drive the plan that we create. So Ocean Lotus, in this particular project, this emulation plan was the first time that we brought a threat actor and a set of TTPs into the emulation library that were focused on Mac OS and Linux. And so there's a detailed scenario there if you check out the emulation library that has movement between Mac OS and Linux as part of the emulation plan. And the other thing that we've done, and kind of going to your comment, Carl, we get a lot of feedback from the community. We try to be responsive to that and evolve our work based on that feedback. And so, based on community feedback, we really tried to make the Ocean Lotus emulation plan very friendly for purple teams. So it has a whole sort of playbook for defenders included in the emulation plan, and guidance on setting up a range environment to test out the emulation plan is all kind of part of this emulation plan if you look in the library there. But as Carl said, enterprises increasingly use Mac and Linux systems. It's important for us to start to push resources out that help people test TTPs against those systems. And so to me, this was a nice evolution or kind of maturation of the emulation library, extending us out to platforms that we haven't focused on today.
So John, as we continue to obviously do more emulation plans at the center, you think we'll continue to take a purple team focus to that as well?
Yeah, I expect us to do more and more of that sort of purple team focus. And I think what that looks like is, yeah, they'll continue to be emulation plans, but emulation plans should always be designed to enable purple teaming.
Yep, agreed. Okay, so this is an updated project. So we saw, obviously, in a previous slide, we talked briefly about Workbench 2. But we also had AttackFlow, 2.1 come out. Now, this is kind of a little bit of a blast from the past because AttackFlow Genesis was 2 years ago in 22, right? Was the first one. And this is probably one of my all-time favorite projects, right up there with NIST 853, and probably the attack mapping to CVE as well. That encourage people to check out. But this project was pretty interesting because it was the first project that tried to understand the relationship between, multi-nodes of an attack chain or graph and what the relationship and attributes were within that kill chain. Can you tell us what the change or what the update was in 2.1 version?
Yeah, so with AttackFlow, we created a data model that allows you to go from, where most teams were kind of studying individual TTPs to understanding how TTPs relate to each other, and then being able to express that in the AttackFlow data model. So now you can say, in this particular attack, we saw technique 1 followed by technique 2 followed by technique 5, and gives you a data model for representing that. So with AttackFlow 2.1, this is one where there's pretty broad use across the community, and we get a lot of feedback about the data model, about the tools and resources and examples that we have. So 2.1 ended up with a larger example corpus, updates to documentation, and with AttackFlow, we tried to make it really accessible. So it's not just documentation and a data model, but there's also a web application that we call the Flow Builder. So the Flow Builder got a very significant overhaul with AttackFlow 2.1, basically making it do all of the things you would expect a good visual editor would do. And so now it very easily saves and exports, snippets, screenshots, or, captures of different sections of a flow. So you can easily, look at that, essentially that graph or that model that the flow creates and use it to build out presentations or include in your threat intel reporting, that sort of thing. So with Attack Flow 2.1, the most significant update that the user community will see is Flow Builder had a major overhaul. And then, as Carl has kind of pointed out here, this is a project where there's, a lot of community use and adoption, and we get a lot of feedback with that, and that leads to a lot of ideas for how to continue to mature and evolve it. So when I look ahead, I expect in 2024 us to continue to advance Attack Flow. The thing that I want us to put effort into this year is really making it easy to visualize flows to align with different use cases. I know that's super generic there, but ultimately when we got started with Flow, we were motivated by a need to improve our ability to communicate to executive leaders about defensive posture. And the thought at the time was, well, if we could start to understand the set of steps an adversary does and how that overlays with our attack coverage, then we can start to have a richer conversation about where our defenses are weak, where we're strong, how we stand against the latest attack in the news, right?
Yeah, I definitely want to double click on that because this is an incredibly important attribute to this project. It really enables choke point analysis. It enables shift left, like where are my detections? Where am I interdicting today? But based on this flow, where should I be interdicting? And so it does a lot from a cyber defensive operational perspective in better understanding your capabilities as an organization, the capabilities of the adversary, and then to John's point, in a graphical way, communicating this to management. Because MITRE ATT&CK does have a glass ceiling. Only so many tech IDs can management kind of process, but when they see the flow and they understand from an overlay perspective what your control architecture is, this becomes really crystal clear on both kind of what your posture is as an organization, but also maybe where your gaps are and where you need to do something in order to better interdict that adversary that your organization is worried about.
Yeah, so in 24 here this year, I expect us to come out with additional resources to improve our ability to visualize flows for a couple of those different scenarios. The other thing that I'm really excited about for 24 is that we've actually kicked off our research project called the Technique Inference Engine. The Technique Inference Engine, what it does is builds on top of a collection of attack flows, the ability to detect or predict what will be the next most likely technique in a sequence. So that'll be research coming out later this year.
That sounds pretty interesting. All right, so we have one more that we just want to bring up, and this is actually a blast from the past. So this was from 22, but John, I can't tell you how many organizations are still just starting their journey on MITRE ATT&CK and are always asking, how do I get started? Like, how do I explain this to my management team or my manager? What's a good way to think about MITRE ATT&CK if I'm, in the beginning of that journey?
Yeah, this is one of those projects that I really like a lot, Carl. Top attack techniques. It's used by teams that are just getting started to figure out, which technique should I look at first, right? But it's also used by sophisticated threat hunting teams to help prioritize techniques as they engage in a threat hunt, right? And so it has that appeal or applicability really across a range of use cases and sort of levels of sort of knowledge and experience working with attack. So in 2024, we'll be refreshing the Top Attack Techniques project. Top attack techniques factors in technique prevalence. So how often is that technique seen in the wild? It created this concept of co-occurrences in techniques. So if you see technique A, you're likely to see technique B. And it uses that concept to drive prioritization. So if technique A always precedes technique B, you might want to focus on, addressing or mitigating technique B. So maybe A was a gateway to several other techniques, right? And then lastly, the top attack technique calculator factors in this concept of actionability. So we'll be refreshing that methodology and pulling in new data from the latest round of the Sightings Ecosystem report, just to keep that resource current and available for the community, because it has been so widely used across levels of
well, to your point, it's incredibly easy to use. It's click, click, done, easy to use. And the research was quite novel because it was a bunch of things that we hadn't thought about yet as a team. We thought about it individually. People were trying to figure out a way to solve this problem. But you know, it has choke point analysis. It has a fairly sophisticated scoring rubric in it, which is all detailed in great detail on the project website. So,
yeah, you know, one of the things that's nice about this project is, you know, we did make all of the math behind the scoring available. I've seen organizations implement it in their own products in-house, but it's also an open source web application that anybody can take and use, or just hit the website and can use directly.
Yeah, you're spot on. We love this project so much. We actually embedded the entire thing directly into our product. And so, and it makes sense because if someone uses the calculator and it spits out, you know, your top 10 TTPs you should worry about, what do you want to do? You want to go test to see can you detect or block those TTPs. So this was a great project. We like it for all those reasons. So anyway, I strongly encourage everybody to check this project out. So that's the last project we're going to talk about today, John. I think we definitely have some questions people have asked us, so we're going to make sure we leave a little bit of time to answer those questions. But let's tell everybody how they can get involved with the center, because I think, you know, this community has been awesome. It's growing year over year, but we're looking for other great teams to join the center and help us with some more of these projects.
Yeah, Carl, as I said earlier, I hope to grow the center, adding several more organizations this year, really trying to bring sophisticated, like-minded teams together to advance threat-informed defense for the whole community. And so while I love and welcome new members into the research program, everything we do is also open and freely available. Getting, you know, your community feedback, your experience is really important for us too. It helps us drive what we do and how we do it. I want to make resources that are easily used and widely impactful. And so your feedback and perspective is critical to enable that too.
So John, let's say somebody is not part of the center, but they take advantage of one of the projects and they have questions or they have feedback on that project. How do they get back to you? How do you want to get that feedback from the community?
Yeah, if you hit our website, depending on the nature of the feedback and the nature of your engagement, that might look like just an email to ctid@mitreingenuity.org. Or, you know, if you're so inclined, you might be on our GitHub site filing issues and that sort of thing. But either way, we love to hear from people and get feedback and use that to help advance what we do.
Great. Well, let's jump to some questions. We're coming up to the top of the webinar, and we've got some great questions here. So let me read you the first one. Could you discuss any specific challenges faced during these collaboration processes and how they were overcome?
Yeah, I think if I look back at our history, you know, honestly, we created a new sort of way of doing research together. And I think one of our bigger barriers or challenges as we got going was helping people understand what it is we do and how we all want to work. So we put a lot of time and effort into enabling collaboration among our members. We get questions all the time about, you know, well, what is my team resource requirements, you know, need to be for a particular project. We very much have embraced an approach of, you know, we'll meet you where you're at. We want people to be able to actively engage in a project in a way that means, or that makes sense for them. We've had projects where people come to the table and serve as, you know, technical reviewers. We've had people come to the table as, you know, sophisticated red teamers helping us build the emulation plan. Others working as a blue team trying to detect that emulation. You know, others still providing a range to test in. So we're very flexible there, and I think that's been one of our bigger challenges. Is we created this unique environment. How do we help people understand it? How do we help people easily engage in it?
No, it makes sense. And so the next question is, what project are you most excited for in 2024? Is there something coming down the pipeline that you think is everyone's going to find particularly interesting?
I'll let you go first, Carl.
Well, well, that's a great question. I've got a couple of them, but I'm going to say Threat Informed Defense Manager, or I don't think that's the right name for it, but that's what I call it.
Yeah, so Threat Informed Defense Manager is supposed to make it much easier for teams to kind of across that triple of threat intel, test and evaluation, and defensive measures to kind of bring your organization's resources together and look at and understand and mature your capabilities. I'm particularly interested and excited about the Mappings Explorer project that's coming up for release in about 4 weeks now. The work that we've done mapping resources to attack continues to be some of the most widely used work that we've done. Carl mentioned CVE to attack. I mentioned NIST 853 to attack. There's AWS to attack, Azure to attack. All of these resources map to attack. Today, they're disparate resources that you have to find and work to synthesize on your own. Mappings Explorer will give you, one single entry point to navigate, explore, and use all of that knowledge in one place. And it's going to make it a lot easier for us to maintain all of that work, which means we'll become more efficient as we develop more mappings moving forward. So more mappings, easier to use for everybody. I think it'll be very widely used.
Need more mappings, just like we need more cowbell, right? So, well, John, we've come to the end of our session today. Just a huge thank you to you and the center and all the work you guys do to help security organizations, whether they're just starting or they're senior and sophisticated, better operationalize the MITRE attack and continue to advance the state of the art and the state of the practice. So big thank you to you and the team, and a great job with this new impact report.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Carl. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.